You're standing in your kitchen, holding the property tax bill, and the number is higher than last year, even though 3 houses on your street now sit empty. You tell yourself it's nothing. I told myself the same thing. Then I started writing the numbers down. What I found is this. 10 states are quietly emptying out from the inside, and the people who stayed are being asked to pay more and more to hold up less and less. It looks like stability. It is the opposite of stability. I didn't believe it at first. I'm not an economist. I'm just a man who noticed that the math in my own life stopped adding up, and I refused to look away. So here's my promise to you. By the end of this, I'll show you one single date buried inside a Census Bureau projection, the year 2034, and once you see what happens that year, you will not be able to unsee it. It rewrites everything. This isn't about strangers in some far-off place. This is about your home, your taxes, and the retirement you were promised. Let me lay it out the way I found it. It started with an obituary page. My local paper still prints them, and one Sunday I noticed the obituary section ran 3 full pages while the birth announcements had shrunk to a single short column. I thought it was a coincidence. The next week, the same thing. The week after that, the same thing again. So I did something simple. I went looking for whether what I was seeing on 3 pages of newsprint was happening on a larger scale. And what the United States Census Bureau reported stopped me cold in the year 2021. For the first time in the recorded history of this country, a majority of American states, 25 of them, recorded more deaths than births. More coffins than cradles, not because of one bad year. The trend was already there before, and it has not reversed. We have a comforting word we use to avoid this. We say a town is slowing down. We say a region is aging. Those words are soft on purpose. The harder word is the one the demographers actually use. They call it natural decrease. It means a place is no longer replacing the people it loses, and once that begins, it tends to feed on itself. I want to be careful here, because I doubted this myself. 1 year of strange numbers could be a pandemic distortion, so I checked the longer record, and that's where it got worse. Take West Virginia. I pulled the historical census counts going back decades. West Virginia's population peaked around the year 1950 at roughly 2 million people. Today, it sits near 1.77 million, a state that has been losing its people on and off for the better part of 70 years. That is not a sudden crash. That is a slow leak nobody declared an emergency over. And here is the part that hit my own wallet and will hit yours. When a place loses working-age people but keeps its retirees, somebody still has to pay for the roads, the water lines, the schools, the fire department, the pensions of the people who already retired from those jobs. The bill doesn't shrink as fast as the population does, so the cost gets divided among fewer and fewer shoulders. That is why 3 empty houses on a street can sit next to a property tax bill that keeps climbing. I used to think those 2 facts contradicted each other. They don't. One causes the other. So I had my first clue. America isn't aging evenly. It's hollowing out in pockets, and the people left inside those pockets are quietly absorbing the cost of the ones who left. But a clue isn't a pattern. I needed to know who was carrying the heaviest load and why some states were bleeding faster than others. Therefore, I went looking for the list, the 10. I cross-checked the Census Bureau's population estimates against its components of change, the part of the data that separates births, deaths, and people moving in or out. And a cluster of states kept surfacing again and again: West Virginia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, California in certain years, Michigan, Maine, which has long been one of the oldest states in the country by median age. Now, some of those names surprised me. New York and California are not the states you picture when you think of decline. They have the big cities, the wealth, the headlines, but that is exactly the trap. A state can post a healthy-looking total while entire counties inside it quietly drain out. The average hides the wound. So I stopped looking at state totals and started looking at counties. And the picture got darker. The Census Bureau publishes how many U.S. counties lost population over the last decade. The answer, when I found it, was more than half. Over half of all counties in the United States had fewer people at the start of the 2020s than 10 years earlier. Most of America, measured by land and by local government, is shrinking. The growth is crowding into a handful of metros, and the rest is being left to thin out. Here is why that matters for your money, even if you live in one of the growing places. A shrinking county still has debts. It issued bonds to build its schools and sewers back when it had more people and expected more. Those bonds don't forgive themselves because the kids grew up and moved to another state. The remaining residents inherit the full obligation, fewer taxpayers, same debt, which means a higher bill per household every single year, just to stand still. I felt that personally when I saw my own assessment go up while the listing prices on my street drifted down. The home isn't worth more. The burden on the home is worth more. Those are not the same thing, and nobody at the county office is going to explain the difference to you. That was the moment I realized I wasn't looking at bad luck in a few unlucky towns. I was looking at a structure, a machine that quietly transfers the cost of decline onto whoever is too rooted, too old, or too tired to leave. And once I understood it was a machine, I had to ask the question I'd been avoiding, but before I go there, I want to pause for just a moment. Everything I've laid out so far, the shrinking counties, the rising bills, the demographic data most people never see, I went much deeper on all of it in my book, Silent Collapse. It's where I assembled the full ledger, the census projections, the pension shortfalls, and the exact steps I worked through when I realized the math in my own life had stopped adding up. If you want the complete picture in one place, the book is available now, and the link is in the description below. It is written the same way I talk to you here, no jargon, no false comfort, just the numbers laid side by side so you can see what they actually mean for your home and your retirement. Now, back to the question, I couldn't stop asking who knew and who stayed quiet, because here is what bothered me most. None of this was a secret. The Census Bureau didn't hide these numbers. The trustees didn't bury them. They published them year after year in plain sight, in reports nobody reads, with titles nobody clicks. The collapse isn't hidden. It's just boring on the surface. And boring is the best disguise a crisis ever invented. So let me show you the report I think they were counting on you to ignore. Every year, the people who run Social Security and Medicare release something called the Trustees Report. It is long, dry, and written in language designed to put you to sleep. I forced myself to read the summary because it is, in plain dollars, the math of your retirement. The most recent report laid it out without flinching. The trust fund that pays your retirement benefits, the Old Age and Survivors Fund, is projected to run short in the early 2030s. The combined date that gets quoted lands around the year 2035, but the retirement piece alone reaches its shortfall sooner, around 2033. And here is the line. They fold into the middle of a paragraph, so you'll skim past it. At that point, the system would only be able to pay about 79 to 83 cents on every dollar of promised benefits. Read that again the way I had to. This is not a rumor. This is not a doom blog. This is the system's own accountants telling you that on the current path, the checks get cut by roughly 20 cents on the dollar within the working life of a person sitting at home right now, planning their retirement around the full amount. For an average benefit, a cut like that is the difference of hundreds of dollars a month. For a couple who built their plan on 2 full checks, it can be the difference between paying the property tax and not. And now connect it to the first clue. Why is the fund running short? Because Social Security works as a pyramid of the living. Today's workers pay for today's retirees. It only holds up as long as there are enough younger workers feeding it. But I just showed you that 25 states are recording more deaths than births, that over half of all counties are shrinking, that the workforce in entire regions is thinning out. The empty houses on my street and the shortfall in the trustees report are the same story told at 2 different scales. Fewer young workers means fewer dollars flowing into the fund. The demographic leak and the retirement shortfall are not 2 problems. They are one problem wearing 2 faces. I sat with that for a while because it changes how you read every reassuring thing you've ever been told. For decades, the message to people your age and mine was simple. Work hard, pay in, and it'll be there for you. That promise was made when the ratio of workers to retirees was strong. In the early years of Social Security, there were many workers for every retiree. Today, that ratio has collapsed toward roughly 2.5 to 3 workers for each beneficiary, and it keeps sliding as the big generations retire and the smaller ones behind them can't refill the base fast enough. Nobody stood up and announced that the deal had quietly changed. They just kept repeating the old promise while the foundation under it eroded. That's the part that turned my unease into something colder. It wasn't only decline, it was decline that everyone in a position to see it chose to describe softly. But I know exactly who is listening right now and feeling a stone drop in their stomach. And I need to stop and talk to you directly, because this next part is for you. Maybe you're already retired. Maybe you're 66, 68, 70. Maybe you were laid off at 58 and never found your way back to the kind of paycheck you had before. You're hearing me lay out the ledger, and a voice in your head is saying, this is all very interesting, but it's too late for me. I already made my choices. I already saw the pattern. Too late. I want to push back on that gently and specifically, because I don't believe it's true, and I won't hand you fear with nothing to hold. Here is the first concrete thing. If you have not yet created your account directly with the Social Security Administration and pulled your own earnings record, do it this week. Not because the system is collapsing tomorrow, it isn't, but because errors in your recorded earnings are common, and every missing year of income can quietly lower your benefit for the rest of your life. People discover gaps from decades ago that were never corrected. You have the legal right to fix them, but the burden is on you to catch them. Nobody mails you a warning. I checked mine and found a year that looked wrong, and chasing it down was free. Second thing, if you are between 62 and your full retirement age and you are still able to delay claiming, understand exactly what delaying buys you. For each year you wait past your full retirement age up to age 70, your monthly benefit grows by roughly 8%. That is a guaranteed increase you cannot buy anywhere in the private market right now without taking on risk. If the future holds a possible trim to benefits, a larger base check is the single best cushion against it because the cut is applied to a bigger number. I'm not telling you what to do. Your health and your cash needs come first. I'm telling you to run the math before you claim, not after. Third, and this one costs nothing but a phone call. Many of the shrinking counties I described are so desperate to keep their remaining residents that they offer property tax relief, freezes, or homestead exemptions for people over a certain age, often 65, that go unclaimed because nobody is told they exist. The empty street rising bill trap I showed you earlier has a back door for seniors in a lot of these places. Call your county assessor's office and ask, in plain words, what relief exists for older homeowners. The worst they can say is none. The best they can say could be hundreds of dollars a year back in your pocket. You did not see the pattern too late. You're seeing it right now while there is still a form to file and a call to make that counts. Now let me turn the page, because there's a layer underneath the retirement shortfall that I almost missed, and it's the one that finally made the whole machine visible. I kept asking myself, if the demographics have been sliding for decades, why does it feel like it's all arriving now? Why this decade? The answer is in a word the financial world uses without ever explaining it to ordinary people: pensions. Not just Social Security, the state and city pensions that were promised to teachers, firefighters, police, and public workers across exactly the states I'd flagged. I pulled the funding data, the kind that groups like the Pew Research teams and state auditors publish, and the gap is enormous. Across the country, state pension systems have promised far more than they have set aside, with the total shortfall measured in the trillions of dollars. Certain states are notorious for it: Illinois, New Jersey, Kentucky, Connecticut. Some of their pension systems are funded at well under half of what they owe. Less than 50 cents set aside for every dollar promised to a retired worker. Here's why that connects to everything else I'd found. A pension is also a pyramid of the living. It assumes a steady stream of new workers paying in and a growing tax base behind it. But these are the same states losing population, the same states with more deaths than births, the same shrinking counties. So the pension promise was built on a future that demographics are now refusing to deliver. And when a pension fund falls short, Where does the money come from? It comes from the current budget, which means it competes with the roads, the schools, the police you actually use today, which means higher taxes or fewer services or both pressed onto a shrinking group of residents who are already paying more to hold up less. I finally saw the full machine. It runs in a loop. People leave or pass away, the tax base thins, the obligations stay. The remaining residents pay more, the higher costs and thinner services push even more people to leave, which thins the base again. Each turn of the wheel makes the next turn faster. Economists have a cold name for this when it really gets going, a doom loop. Once a place crosses a certain line, the act of trying to pay its old promises drives away the very people it needs to pay them. West Virginia didn't lose 70 years of population by accident. It rode that loop slowly while the rest of us called it the way things are. And that's when the small thing I'd noticed on my own street stopped looking small. The rising bill next to the empty houses wasn't a local quirk. It was the loop reaching my block. But I still hadn't found the bottom of it. I had the mechanism. What I didn't have yet was the moment it becomes undeniable for the entire country at once, the date passed which we can no longer pretend it's just a few unlucky states. And that's the entry that completes the whole ledger. It's a single line in a Census Bureau projection, and when I found it, everything I'd written down finally locked together. The Census Bureau put out a set of national projections built on this exact demographic math, and inside it is a milestone the country has never reached before, not once since the founding. They project that by around the year 2034, for the first time in American history, older adults, people 65 and over, will outnumber children under the age of 18. Sit with that. For the entire existence of this nation, there have always been more kids than seniors, more people entering the workforce than leaving it, more cradles than coffins. That single fact is the unspoken assumption underneath Social Security, underneath pensions, underneath rising home values, underneath the whole promise that tomorrow has more people and more money than today. Around 2034, by the government's own arithmetic, that assumption flips permanently. The base of the pyramid becomes narrower than the top. And every system I've described to you, the retirement fund, the state pensions, the local tax base, the home values that depend on a buyer existing to purchase your house, every one of them was engineered for a country that is about to stop existing in that form. This is the part that gave me chills, because it ties the obituary page back to the trustees report, back to the empty houses. The 25 states with more deaths than births aren't an anomaly. They are the leading edge. They are simply the places that arrived at the national future early. What's happening in West Virginia and Maine today is a preview of the number the whole country crosses around 2034. And here is the most important thing I can tell you, the thing that turns this from doom into something you can actually use. The date is published. The math is not hidden. The Census Bureau projection, the trustees report, the pension funding numbers, they are all sitting in public, free, right now, this minute. The collapse isn't a conspiracy. It's a slow, documented, openly available fact that was simply too dull and too far away to make anyone act. That means you have something almost nobody around you has. You have the date before it arrives. You can read the same loop the demographers read, and you can position yourself ahead of the turn instead of under it. So let me give you the finished picture, the way I'd lay the last card on the table. If you own a home in one of the shrinking counties, your house is not a guaranteed nest egg waiting for a buyer. It is an asset whose value depends on a younger person existing nearby with the income to purchase it, and in half the counties in this country, that younger person is leaving. Knowing that now, while values still hold, is the difference between selling on your terms and being trapped on someone else's. If you depend on Social Security, you now know the shortfall date and the size of the possible trim, which means you can build your plan around the conservative number instead of the optimistic one. The people who get hurt worst are always the ones who planned on the full promise and never read the footnote. If you live in a high pension debt state, You can expect the squeeze to arrive as rising local taxes and shrinking local services, and you can decide calmly years early whether you want to be paying into that loop in your 70s or whether your retirement dollars stretch further somewhere off the wheel. None of that requires money you don't have or expertise nobody gave you. It requires one thing only: the willingness to look directly at numbers that were designed to make you look away. I started with 3 pages of obituaries and a single column of births in a Sunday paper. I ended with a census date that tells me the entire country is about to become my emptying neighborhood. The clues were never hidden. They were just scattered across a dozen dull reports that no one bothered to lay side by side. I'm an ordinary man. I just refuse to stop writing them down. And now you're holding the same picture I am. Here's what I want you to feel as you sit there. Not panic. Clarity. For years you sensed the ground shifting under your feet and were told it was nothing, that the system was fine, that the promise still held. You weren't imagining it. You were right. You just hadn't seen the date yet. You're the kind of person who would rather see the whole pattern clearly, even when it's hard, than be soothed with half of it and ambushed by the rest. That's why you're still here. Most people clicked away the moment it got uncomfortable. You stayed for the date. So tell me one thing in the comments, and be specific, because I read them, and I'm building the next ledger from what you send. Which clue landed hardest for you? The 25 states with more coffins than cradles, the 79 cents on the dollar, or the year 2034 when the seniors outnumber the children? And tell me what state you're watching from, because I want to map where in this country people are already feeling the loop turn. Say it plainly. Your county might be the next name on the list, and your comment might warn someone who hasn't looked yet. If you'd rather keep your eyes open than be caught off guard, stay with me and keep this ledger going, because we are not finished. The next entry I'm working on is the one I almost couldn't believe when the numbers came back. The quiet reason so many of those vanishing jobs in the shrinking counties are never coming back, even if the people did. It's not what they told you. And once you see who's holding the other end of it, you'll understand why nobody in charge wanted you connecting these dots in the first place. Keep writing it down. I will too. Because here is the last thing I learned, and it's the one I keep coming back to. The people who read these reports early never sound the alarm. They simply move first, quietly, while the rest of us are still being told everything is fine. You and I just stopped being late. We read the date together. Now we get to be early for once in our lives, and that changes everything about what comes next.